Hello, my name is Claire Pearson, and for years I believed love meant sacrifice. I paid the bills, covered the debts, and carried my family on my back until one night at a birthday dinner, my own mother looked me in the eye and said I wasn't even part of the family. That one sentence cut deeper than all the years of exhaustion, but it also lit the fire that changed everything. If this kind of story resonates with you, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep telling the stories that matter. Let's begin. I thought love meant sacrifice. I never knew sacrifice could erase who I was. The words echoed in my head like a confession as I stared at the glowing spreadsheets on my laptop. Rows of numbers, highlighted cells, and neatly labeled tabs rent utilities, medical bills, tuition, emergency transfers. Each line carried a memory, and each number was a reminder of what I had given up. My studio apartment was silent except for the hum of the old refrigerator in the corner and the occasional hiss from the radiator. Secondhand furniture filled the space, peeling veneer on the coffee table. A sagging couch I'd bought off Craigslist shelves stacked with binders of financial records that seemed heavier than the walls themselves. I kept thinking of how this had started years ago. In college, while my roommates planned spring break trips, I scrubbed dishes at the campus diner, sliding tips into an envelope marked family. My father's construction company had collapsed during the recession, and the house had been drowning in overdue notices. The kitchen table back home was never clear. It was buried under stacks of envelopes stamped "Final Notice." At 19, I sent my first wire transfer to cover an insurance premium. It was supposed to be temporary. It turned into a habit I could never break. The irony was cruel. I had lived like a pauper in a crowded dorm while paying for my brother Daniel's car repairs, and Sean's tuition deposits he never completed. My clothes came from thrift shops, yet the money I sent home kept my family in a 3-bedroom house with a working furnace, kept their lights on, kept them fed. I told myself it was love. I told myself it was belonging. My father, Edward, never asked directly. He was proud but tired, his health faltering more each year. When I visited, I caught him coughing in the garage, saw the way he pressed a hand to his chest as if steadying himself. His voice still carried authority, but his silence around money told me he knew exactly who was carrying the weight. My mother, Marjorie, was less subtle. She accepted my transfers with clipped thank yous, her resentment always just beneath the surface. She never forgave me for making their survival dependent on me. In her eyes, my competence was an insult, a mirror reflecting back her own helplessness. Daniel was 31, the golden boy who had once been the star quarterback. Now he lived in a suburban home with his wife and children, supported partly by my loans he never acknowledged. Sean, at 26, floated between part-time jobs and failed relationships, his charm cushioning every fall. I envied the lightness with which they drifted, knowing I was the tether keeping them from crashing completely. I didn't admit any of this until my sessions with Dr. Karen Liu. Sitting across from her in a calm office filled with soft light and muted paintings, I felt stripped of my rehearsed excuses. She listened quietly as I explained how normal it was to cover hospital bills or wire money when a car got repossessed. Finally, she tilted her head and said gently, "Claire, you've been parentified. You've become the father of this family, not the daughter. That's not your role." I laughed nervously, deflecting with a shrug. It's just what families do for each other. But her words clung to me long after I left her office. Father, not daughter. Provider, not child. One evening, I ran the numbers again, staring at the red negative balance in my savings account. I had lived this way for so long, I couldn't remember what it was like to make decisions purely for myself. The exhaustion pressed down like a weight on my chest. I thought of Marcus, the boyfriend, who had left 3 months ago. He told me I was too consumed with solving everyone else's crises to notice our own relationship crumbling. At the time, I called him selfish. Now, in the quiet of my apartment, I wondered if he had only said out loud what I refused to face. The phone rang, cutting through the silence. I didn't need to see the caller ID. Only one person called, this late voice clipped and urgent. I answered anyway. "Claire," my mother's tone was already impatient, as though I should have anticipated the request before she even made it. "Your father's turning 60 next week. We can't let the day pass without a proper dinner. The family deserves something special." There it was, the word family wielded like a weapon heavy with expectation. "I'll take care of it," I said without hesitation, the answer automatic practiced. Good. Make it nice. He deserves it. She added, though her voice lacked warmth. She didn't say thank you. She never did. After the call ended, I stared at the ceiling of my cramped apartment. My heart twisted with loyalty and dread in equal measure. I wanted Dad to feel celebrated, to forget the surgeries, the debt the way age had carved into him. But the knot in my stomach told me this dinner would be more than a celebration. Something waited there, just out of sight, like a storm gathering on the horizon. I hadn't realized it yet, but that dinner would be the night my mother cut me out of the family with a single sentence. The chandeliers of Meridian sparkled above us, but the warmth I craved never arrived. The restaurant glowed with golden light, as if it were determined to cast a flattering veil over everything beneath it. White linens covered the tables, tall glasses gleamed, and from our private dining alcove, the city stretched out in a constellation of its own. Yet none of it softened the cold knot in my chest. I had told myself all day that this dinner would be about my father, about gratitude and celebration. But even before we sat down, I could feel the invisible lines being drawn. The hostess led us to the long mahogany table I had reserved. My father's face lit up when he saw the roses in the centerpiece, his favorite Cabernet already uncorked. Beautiful, he murmured, squeezing my shoulder with genuine warmth. For a fleeting second, it felt worth it. But then Marjorie shifted to the far end, directing Daniel and Melissa with their children to sit close to her. Sean took a seat opposite them, leaving the spot beside my father conspicuously empty until the last moment when I slipped in. Somehow, though I had orchestrated every detail, I found myself positioned just enough off to the side that I wasn't part of the core. Conversation bubbled easily at first. Melissa helped Olivia cut her steak while Noah fiddled with the silverware. Daniel launched into a story about a new client, his voice brimming with confidence. Sean teased him the old camaraderie flowing freely. I forced a smile, lifting my glass when toasts were made, though my place at the table felt more like a polite afterthought than a belonging. The jokes turned sharper as the wine loosened tongues. "Claire, you must love places like this," Marjorie said sweetly, her gaze sweeping the crystal and polished silver. "After all, you don't have a husband or children to worry about. Plenty of disposable income." Daniel chuckled. "She probably worked 80 hours this week just to pay for the breadbasket." Sean smirked, swirling his drink. "As long as she can track it in her spreadsheets, she's happy. Remember when she used to tally allowance money and Excel obsessive even at 10 years old?" Their laughter rose around me like a tide, warm and easy for them, cutting for me. I glanced at my father, hoping for rescue, but he was beaming at everyone's cheer, oblivious to the undercurrents. I swallowed the sting and reminded myself this night was for him. The main courses arrived. Sizzling steaks, baked potatoes glistening with butter dishes that would devour more of my paycheck than my rent did. I nodded to the waiter, discreetly ensuring my card was still on file, ensuring no one else would bear the burden. The man gave a subtle incline of his head, he knew. And for the first time, I wondered if every server here recognized the pattern, if they had seen countless dinners where one person silently carried the weight while the others basked. I tried to redirect the conversation. "Dad, remember the summer you taught me to balance the checkbook? I was so proud when everything matched down to the cent." Marjorie cut in before he could answer. He always had patience for the boys. Girls, though, were another story, so demanding. Heat flushed my cheeks. Daniel clapped my father on the back, laughing about driving lessons. Sean reminisced about concerts. Every time I tried to speak, my words dissolved under barbed commentary. Dessert came with ceremony, a chocolate cake inscribed in elegant script. We sang, and for a heartbeat, the ugliness receded. My father's eyes shone as he blew out the candles. Then the gifts began. Daniel presented a polo shirt folded neatly in a box. Melissa handed over a book on woodworking, chosen with thoughtful care. Sean offered a framed photo from a fishing trip, grinning at the memory. My father accepted each gift warmly, his gratitude genuine. Finally, I slid the velvet box across the table. My hands trembled slightly. "This is from me, Dad." He opened it slowly. The Omega watch gleamed under the chandeliers, its navy face catching the light. His breath caught. "Claire," he whispered, voice breaking. "It's too much. I can't. You can. I interrupted softly. You deserve something beautiful. His eyes filled with tears as I fastened the watch around his wrist. For once, he looked at me not as a provider, but as a daughter who had given him joy. It should have been a moment of pure connection. Instead, the air thickened with tension. Daniel stared, envy etched across his face. Sean whistled under his breath. Melissa shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the children. But it was Marjorie who seized the silence, her lips curling into something like triumph. Well, she said, her tone sweet as syrup, when you don't have a husband or children to support, I suppose you can afford little luxuries. Or maybe it's not luxury at all. Maybe it's strategy. The words sliced through the room. My fork froze midair. She's always been good at buying affection. Marjorie continued, her eyes locking on mine. Throwing money around so the rest of us feel small. My father stiffened. Margie, that's enough. But she pressed forward, her voice sharp now, the years of bitterness boiling over. You use your money like a leash, Claire. Making everyone dependent, making yourself important. But let's be honest, without your checkbook. What are you, pathetic? Alone. Not even part of this family. The chandeliers still glittered above us. The city still shone beyond the windows. Yet all I could hear was the cruel laugh that followed her final sentence. And then she said the words that shattered me. You're not even part of this family. The air around me froze. My mother had erased me with 8 words. Every sound in the restaurant seemed to collapse into silence. Forks paused mid-air. The sizzle of steak from the open kitchen faded to a dull hum, and even Olivia's giggle died in her throat. My pulse pounded so loud I thought the chandeliers themselves could hear it. 8 words delivered like a guillotine had severed me from the people I had sacrificed everything for. Dr. Liu's voice flickered in my memory. Love cannot be purchased. Those words had once been a comfort, a balm for the way I poured money into bottomless pits and called it devotion. Now they twisted, warped by my mother's accusation, as if she had stolen my therapist's insight and poisoned it. In her mouth, it was not wisdom. It was a weapon. I trembled, my hands gripping the linen napkin on my lap so tightly the seams threatened to tear. Every instinct screamed at me to shrink, to swallow the humiliation like I always did, to tell myself it wasn't worth the fight. My father's glass clinked against his plate as his hand shook. He looked at me with pain in his eyes, his mouth opening as if to defend me, then closing again. Edward had never found the courage to stand between Marjorie and her barbs. Tonight was no different. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, color draining from his face. Sean stared at his drink, pretending to study the melting ice. They were complicit in their silence, guilty in the way only those who had feasted on my sacrifices could be. Melissa gathered Olivia and Noah closer, whispering to them as if shielding them from a storm. The waiter froze at the corner of the alcove tray, trembling, unsure whether to step forward or retreat. Something inside me snapped. The tremor in my body steadied, transforming into a stillness that felt like steel. I placed the napkin carefully on the table, pushed back my chair, and rose. Conversations from nearby tables hushed entirely. All eyes were on me, though my gaze was locked on the woman who had just declared me an outsider in my own bloodline. If I'm not family, I said, my voice cutting through the tension like glass shattering, then don't ask me for money again. The words hung in the air, echoing louder than her cruelty. For the first time, my mother's confidence faltered. A flicker of doubt crossed her face, a shadow that betrayed fear. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder thick with carefully tabbed documents. I had carried it for months, maybe years, though I hadn't realized until now why I kept it so close. One by one, I spread the receipts across the table, the paper sliding over the polished wood like cards in a game none of them knew I had been playing all along. $18,000 for Dad's surgery, I said clearly, my finger pressing on the hospital invoice. $12,000 to cover the mortgage when you fell behind. Another sheet fluttered free. $8,000 for Daniel's repossessed car. I tossed the receipt in his direction. He flinched as if it were a blade. And $6,000 for Sean's tuition, which never led to graduation. The last paper landed before my younger brother, his jaw tightening as he refused to meet my eyes. Shock rippled across the table. Daniel's mouth opened, but no words came. Sean's face flushed crimson shame breaking through his mask of charm. My father sagged in his chair, tears glistening while Melissa's hand tightened protectively on her daughter's shoulder. The waiter shifted uncertain as the other diners openly stared. A couple at the next table whispered audibly, "She's been paying for everything." I inhaled slowly, savoring the silence that finally belonged to me. "You've treated me like your bank." I continued, my voice steady now, each word deliberate. "And I let you. I let you strip me bare and call it love. But no more. Tonight it ends." Marjorie's chair screeched as she pushed back slightly, panic flashing in her eyes. She reached for words but found none. Her triumph dissolved her mouth opening and closing soundlessly as though drowning. I turned toward the waiter. "Cancel my card," I instructed, my voice firm. "Separate checks. I'll pay for mine." The man nodded, relief flickering in his eyes as though he had long awaited justice on my behalf. Gasps circled the room. My mother leaned forward, voice desperate, now stripped of its venom. "Claire, don't you dare walk out on this family." I laughed once softly, but without humor. "You just told me I wasn't part of it. Consider this your wish granted." I pulled a crisp 100 from my wallet, placed it neatly atop my receipt, and added a generous tip. My share was done. My debt, real or imagined, was paid in full. The rest of the bill loomed before them like judgment, a weight they would have to carry for once. Marjorie's composure cracked. "You can't. What will people think?" I straightened my spine taller than it had ever been, my voice calm. "They'll think I finally remembered my worth." Chairs, scraped whispers swirled, and the chandeliers above seemed to shine brighter, illuminating every stunned face at the table. My father whispered my name, his voice trembling with regret, but I didn't turn back. For the first time in years, I walked away with nothing but my own freedom. The night I walked out of Meridian, I thought I'd feel empty. Instead, I felt something I hadn't in years: relief. Relief was a strange companion, almost alien, as I stepped into the freezing night air after slamming the door on a world I had carried too long. For hours afterward, I replayed my words at the table, the folder of receipts spread like evidence in a trial, and the shock painted on every face. "Don't ask me for money again." The line echoed not just in their ears, but in mine. It wasn't bravado. It was a promise I intended to keep. Back in my studio apartment, the silence hummed with possibility. The couch was still sagging, the wallpaper still peeling, but the space felt different, mine, finally mine. For years, this apartment had been a bunker, a holding cell where I collapsed after long hours recharging just enough to send more money outward. Now it felt like the first corner of the world I had claimed back for myself. Then the phone began. It rang until I turned the ringer off. Then came the voicemails. The little red light blinked furiously on my machine like a heartbeat I no longer wanted to sync with. One by one, I listened just enough to know their shape. Edward's voice cracked. "Claire, sweetheart, your mother didn't mean it. She's stubborn. Please don't cut us off. We need you. I need you." His words carried guilt and helplessness, and it tore at me, but behind them was the same expectation: return resume rescue. Daniel's voice followed, smooth but strained. "You can't just walk away. We're family. Look, we've all made mistakes, but you know you're stronger than the rest of us. We rely on you because you can handle it. That's not a bad thing. Don't punish us for being weaker." His plea dressed itself in flattery, but it was manipulation. Sean's message came last, delivered in slurred tones. "I know I've screwed up, Claire. I'm sorry. Okay, don't hate me. I'll get it together. I promise. Just don't abandon us. Don't abandon me," he always promised. He never delivered. Then one night I pressed play and heard my mother's voice. Marjorie's tone was different, but no less sharp. "Claire, listen. I shouldn't have said what I did, but you know how I am. I speak without thinking. You're still my daughter. Of course you are. But your father's retirement account is gone. Daniel's car payment is overdue, and Sean is Sean. The mortgage, the credit cards, the medical bills, they're piling up. I know you don't want to hear it, but you're the only one who can fix this. Come home, Claire. Fix it." I deleted the message without listening to the rest. For the first time in my adult life, I booked something spontaneous. A week in Hawaii, no plan, no agenda, no family. The confirmation email glowed on my screen like a rebellion written in bold letters. I packed a single suitcase, and when the plane lifted off, I swear I felt a weight fall from my shoulders and tumble into the clouds below. Hawaii greeted me with salt on the air and colors so vivid I thought the world had been washed clean. The sand was warm, the ocean relentless but freeing. I walked barefoot until my legs ached, watched sunsets bleed orange into purple, let strangers hand me drinks with paper umbrellas. At a spa, I lay still while gentle hands pressed out years of tension, as though kneading away not just knots in my back, but the obligations chained to it. I thought I would feel guilty. Instead, I felt alive. I laughed for no reason, cried once under a sky so bright with stars it made me dizzy, and realized how much of my life had been devoted to surviving, never to living. I ordered room service without checking my budget, slept until noon, read novels I had abandoned years ago. With every small act of indulgence, I reclaimed another piece of myself. Dr. Liu's words returned like a lighthouse in the dark. You deserve to live for yourself. I repeated them silently again and again until they no longer felt like borrowed wisdom, but my own mantra. On my last night, I walked the beach alone, waves lapping at my ankles. I lifted a glass of cheap champagne I'd carried from the hotel bar, the bubbles fizzing like laughter. I'm done being their safety net, I whispered into the ocean breeze. My voice didn't shake. It rang steady final. But while I learned how to breathe, my family began to drown. 3 months later, the cracks I'd left behind had become canyons. Spring painted the city in pale green blossoms, pushing through the chill. But in my family's world, everything was collapsing. I didn't need to be inside Daniel's home to know it. The calls, the frantic messages, the whispered updates from Sarah painted the picture clearly enough. When I finally drove past their suburb one evening, I saw it written in the details: the untrimmed lawn, the second car missing from the driveway, the blinds drawn in the middle of the afternoon. Daniel's voice on the phone had lost its smoothness. Claire, listen, the bank took the car. I just need help covering the payments until I'm back on my feet. You know I'll pay you back. His words stumbled over themselves, promises stitched with desperation. I closed my eyes, remembering every "I'll pay you back" that had turned to dust. No, Daniel, I said gently but firmly. You'll figure it out. I'm not your safety net anymore. The silence on the line was filled with his breathing, shallow and angry. Then the click. Days later, Sean showed up outside my building. His face gaunt, clothes rumpled. He clutched a backpack like a lifeline. They kicked me out. He blurted, eyes wide. The landlord changed the locks. I've got nowhere to go. His voice cracked into a pleading whine. Please, Claire. Just for a while. I'll get back on track, I swear. The old reflex pulled at me, the instinct to fix, to shelter, to make him whole. But I looked at him and saw not just my brother, but every late-night transfer, every broken promise, every lie wrapped in charm. My chest ached, but my voice was steady. I can't. You have to face this, Sean. You're cruel. He spat, his mask slipping, then faltered into tears. You're all I have. No, I whispered more to myself than to him. You had choices. You just never took them. I turned and closed the door, his sobs muffled behind it. At work, the contrast was startling. My office buzzed with energy charts and presentations reflecting success I had built with relentless discipline. When my manager announced my promotion to senior analyst, my colleagues cheered. I smiled, but beneath the applause was a quiet truth: I was finally thriving because I had stopped pouring everything into a black hole. One evening, my phone lit up with Sarah's name. I hesitated before answering, bracing for another plea. Instead, her voice was calm, almost relieved. Claire, I need to say thank you. Daniel, he hid how bad it was. The late bills, the loans, all of it. I kept thinking you'd fix it like always. But when you didn't, it forced us to face reality. I don't know what will happen to our marriage, but I know you did the right thing. Her words stunned me. I had prepared myself for anger, blame, maybe even resentment. Instead, she offered validation I hadn't known I craved. I thought I was being heartless, I admitted softly. You weren't, Sarah said. You were the only honest one. After we hung up, I sat in my quiet apartment, tears streaking my face, not of guilt, but of release. For the first time, someone from that house saw me clearly. Then came Olivia. Her small voice trembled through the speaker. Aunt Claire, I love you. Will you still come to my birthday? The lump in my throat nearly choked me. Of course, sweetheart, I whispered. I'll never stop loving you. That call anchored me more than any therapy session or promotion ever could. She was my reminder that my love could exist without being exploited. As the days passed, the collapse deepened. Creditors circled the house, threatened foreclosure. Sean drifted between couches, Daniel's pride cracked open like glass. Marjorie was strangely silent, her pride a prison of its own making. The fortress I had propped up for years was finally crumbling brick by brick without me. And then came the message I didn't expect Dad wanted us back at Meridian. 1 year after the night I was erased, I walked back into Meridian. The chandeliers sparkled just as they had before, dripping with gold and crystal light. But this time they didn't mock me. They didn't shine on my humiliation. They simply glowed as if indifferent, waiting to see what I would make of them. I paused at the entrance, breathing in the scent of grilled steak and red wine, a memory colliding with the present. Last year, I had walked out, broken, stripped, severed. Tonight, I returned whole. My father stood near the host stand, his suit freshly pressed, the Omega watch gleaming on his wrist. His face was thinner, more lined, but those eyes carried hope. Claire, he said softly, as though the word itself were a prayer. He embraced me with arms that trembled slightly, gratitude etched into every movement. Behind him, the rest of the family waited. Daniel's posture had lost its arrogance. Sean shifted nervously, his charm muted his shoulders, bent beneath invisible weight. Melissa stood steady, her hand resting on Olivia's shoulder, Sarah at her side. And then there was Marjorie. Smaller, somehow diminished. Her once sharp features now carried fragility softened by illness and the scar of a recent heart attack. The defiance in her eyes was gone, replaced by something I had never seen before, fear and beneath it remorse. We were ushered into the same private alcove, the city still glittering through tall windows. But the seating was different this time. No one exiled me to the end, no invisible lines cutting me out. Everyone contributed to the bill, the waitstaff treating us as equals rather than witnesses to a silent transaction. It felt almost surreal. For long minutes, conversation stuttered and faltered as though each of us walked on unfamiliar ground. Finally, Marjorie reached into her handbag and pulled out an envelope. Her hands shook as she slid it toward me. I wrote something, she said, her voice rasping. I opened the letter slowly, the paper trembling in my hands. Her handwriting slanted uneven. I was cruel. I was jealous. I punished you for being strong where I was weak. You deserved love, not contempt. I am sorry. The words blurred through tears I hadn't expected. For years I had begged for recognition, even begged for scraps of acknowledgement. Now too late, and yet just in time they were finally given. I folded the letter carefully, tucking it into my purse, not as proof, but as closure. I'll be family, I said, looking around the table. If love is mutual, not transactional, I can't go back to being your safety net. But I won't stop being your daughter, your sister, your aunt, as long as respect is part of the bargain. The silence that followed wasn't hostile this time. It was reverent, as though everyone understood that a new contract had been written, one with boundaries instead of debts. The evening unfolded gently. Plates were passed around, laughter, hesitant at first, then warmer, unforced. Daniel told a self-deprecating story about public transit after losing his car, and even Sean admitted he was working 2 jobs. Now pride swallowed for survival. Melissa spoke about stability returning to their home. Sarah chimed in with gratitude that things were finally honest. Then Olivia slipped from her seat and climbed into my lap, her little arms wrapping tightly around my neck. Aunt Claire, she whispered, her voice muffled against my shoulder. You're the heart of this family. The words cracked something inside me, not with pain, but with a kind of healing I hadn't thought possible. I pressed my cheek against her hair, inhaling the innocence that had survived the wreckage. At the end of the night, my father rose slowly, lifting his glass. His hands were unsteady, but his voice was clear. To family, he said the phrase resonant, not hollow. I hesitated, then lifted my glass too. The bitterness that once poisoned me was gone. In its place was strength, not the strength of carrying everyone, but the strength of standing on my own. For the first time, those words felt real. She walked into the fire of betrayal and emerged unburned, carrying not their debts but her own freedom. Justice did not arrive in an instant, but when it came, it cracked open the lies and forced every silent accomplice to face the truth. When injustice is met with unyielding resolve, the final verdict can echo across a lifetime louder than any cruel dismissal. No wall of pride or manipulation can stand forever against the tide of truth. Like, share, subscribe, and comment your thoughts about this story type 1 if you feel the same.